So good morning. In Hungarian, it would be jó reggelt. And it is a pleasure to come back. I enjoyed it last time. Thank you, Karen and the team, for inviting me. And what I'd like to talk about is something which I'm getting very passionate about. And it's the word engagement, which is really important. And I'm going to show you why I think it might become one of the key new terms in language teaching methodology, and hopefully I'll be able to convince you about that. So let's just define this. Engagement, as you would guess, in general concerns active participation and involvement in certain behaviors. And of course, student engagement would be involvement in school-related activities and academic tasks. So basically, the first thing is student engagement is often hailed as the core of the education enterprise. In language education, the significance of student engagement, I would argue, is even greater, because in order to acquire communicative competence, students need to be actively involved in the learning process. And I think I don't have to spend any time arguing this. Basically, communicative competence cannot be acquired without students being engaged. So it just won't work. Now look at this. This is the journal Educational Psychologist. This is the main official journal of the American Psychological Association, which is one of the most powerful bodies in the social sciences in the world. So this is their main journal, and in 2015 they had a special issue of this journal devoted to the topic of engagement. And just from the introduction, 2 quotes. What they said, it's the holy grail of learning. Sounds good. And the other one is one of the hottest research topics in the field of educational psychology. Okay? So this is going to be my last academic quote, so don't worry. But I just wanted to show you that what I'm going to talk about is something which many people get very excited about. And today, first, I'd like to do more or less 3 things. One is first just to talk about engagement and why it's that important in the 21st century. Because the argument will be that we are living and teaching in a new era where we have to rethink some of our categories, and engagement is a typical 21st century topic. And then I'm going to show you the scope of what engagement covers, and I'm going to focus on 2 issues, the peer group and the school context. And you'll see there are some other equally important issues. It's just that these are 2 issues which perhaps we talk less about, so these are not that common. They concern the kind of overall psychological tapestry of the classroom, the classroom environment. Now, let me make my case for the term engagement, and especially because this is a topic we are working on a book on, Sarah Mercer and I, for Cambridge University Press. And I'm going to show you the title and the parameters at the very end, also some other relevant books. Now, this is the basic premise. In today's, and let me read it out because I spent so much time trying to put this together. In today's globalized digital age, young people are continuously bombarded with information through multiple channels, and the pace of social life has been intensified by social media in an unprecedented manner. Okay, so that's quite a mouthful. So look at just these words which I highlighted, and I think those are very 21st century words. Globalized, digital, bombarded, multiple channels, intensified, social media. I must say, when I was still teaching English rather than writing about teaching English, these were not issues. So these are all very new issues. And this is the point, in an unprecedented manner. So I'd like to argue that it's not just that every generation believes that, the things are changing for the worse or things. I think there's a major reconstruction of the whole field of education. Students are very different now than they were, let's say, 15 years ago, whereas we teachers are very similar to what we were like 15 years ago, a bit older, but we have to adjust. So, there are too many competing influences on a student's mind at any time. And this creates a whole new situation for teachers to consider. So that's going to be the underlying belief, in this talk. And let me give you an example. My field has been motivation. And it's been very well received over the decades because the teachers know that in the end, a student will make progress if they are motivated. So teachers have been interested in ways to motivate learners. It's been one of those academic areas which has been very saleable to practicing professionals because everybody saw the importance. However, things changed because nowadays these competing kind of distraction temptations can cancel out even high levels of motivation. So simply, it's not enough anymore to create a motivating environment or even to actually create individual motivation in learners, because they might be motivated, but there are 1,000 other things which happen simultaneously, and this is why engagement is important. If a student is engaged, this means that his or her motivational drive has succeeded in cutting through the multitude of distractions, temptations, and alternatives. So in a way, and I'm really proud of this, this sentence, this is not something taken from other people, I've written this. So motivation is necessary for preparing the deal, but engagement is indispensable for sealing the deal. And once, I was on the roll of creating this, look at this next one. Engagement equals motivation plus implementation. And I genuinely believe that this is true. So when Sarah Mercer, your good friend who is at the University of Graz, suggested that she came to me and said, motivation is important. When I talk to teachers, they like it. But what really gets them excited is when I start talking about engagement. And that's the term which actually really seems relevant to teachers because it's not just, this kind of general thing, we motivate learners and let's hope they will actually manifest this motivation in their behaviors, but engagement is actually getting them involved. And this is now the big challenge in the 21st century classroom. We've got a big problem. And let me show you, look at this. The Gallup Institute has been running in the US an engagement survey now for about 15 years, every year. Now, when Gallup survey, when they do something, they do it big. So it's 900,000 students, talk about a sample of 900,000, that's impressive, and 3,300 schools. Now, guess what the proportion was of students who were actually engaged. 50% were engaged. It gets worse. 29 were not engaged. 21 were actively disengaged, but the real worrying thing is the next one, the last one. There is a negative decline. By grade 11, that is, as they mature, engagement drops. Disengagement drops to 66%. So basically, of those who are in the finishing years of their secondary school, high school studies, about a third are only engaged. So obviously, teachers in the 21st century are not doing a very good job. And what I'd like to say is, it's not just our fault. Times are changing. It's very difficult now to engage students. So, our task is to promote student engagement, and the question is, of course, how? What I'm going to show you is several areas, of which two of which I will discuss. Okay, but let's just go through. Engaging, the term engage, it's a very useful term in English because you need a target. So engage in something or engage with something. And actually, once you start looking at what are the key facets of kind of the learning environment which students must engage with, you've got a very neat and parsimonious list, a quite short list. And then the next task is to actually create ways of engaging with those facets. And the idea is that if you have managed to cover, not all of them, nobody can do all of them, but quite a few areas, then students will get into a positive kind of trajectory. Okay, so first one is, obviously, and this I'm going to talk about, engaging with the school context in general. Many people lose their motivation as soon as they enter the school gates, at the school grounds. So there is basically, they are not, they say, I'm not academic. That's a very British way of saying, basically, I've been naughty, made the teacher's life hell, and dropped out of school and started to make a lot of money. Okay, there are certain areas, so I just listed things. I'm not going to talk about it, but how you can engage with the school context, actually I am going to talk about it, but later. Adopting school norms, creating a feeling of ownership of the environment, developing academic confidence, fostering a sense of belonging to the school community, okay? And all these these kind of targets can be associated with very specific strategies. So there's quite a lot we can do. Engagement is a very, very useful concept in that we can actually promote it. The next thing is engaging with the foreign language in general. And how can you do that? Generating motivation and vision for learning the language, which is my kind of core interest. Conveying the need and relevance of the language, developing language learner identities, relating to each other the language as a school subject and the language as used beyond the school. So trying to make people realize that language is actually more than just a school subject. Next one, engaging with the syllabus and the teaching materials. Okay, how can we do that? Raising curiosity and interest, matching the syllabus to the students' needs to make it relevant, developing positive self-beliefs and growth mindset, reducing anxiety and fostering positive emotions. By now, those of you who are a little bit familiar with the literature, you realize there's nothing new here. And that's great, actually. What engagement offers us is to pull together the kind of accumulated wisdom in several different areas into one framework. So that I really think that engagement is one of the most useful topics in that sense that suddenly you don't have this compartmentalization that I'm into motivation, oh, I'm into learning strategies, oh, I'm into task-based language teaching, okay? And, engagement actually can relate to all of those equally. Next one, engaging with the learning tasks, talking about task-based learning. So task-based language teaching, project-based learning, fascinating thing. There's too little project-based learning at the moment in the field. It's known, but it's not practiced enough. Goal setting and progress checks, harnessing the power of digital or virtual worlds. Again, it's an unexplored area that, students spend most of their time in front of the screens, and we don't really tap into this sufficiently, okay? Autonomy and self-regulation, techniques to boost concentration. Engaging with one's peers, that's the other subject I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail. It's basically the relevant areas of group dynamics and classroom management, particularly promoting group cohesiveness and social acceptance, facilitating meaningful interpersonal encounters. So students can engage with the school context if they can engage with their peers, and we can help them to engage with their peers. And finally, engaging with the teacher. And you would think that doesn't need any special kind of techniques. I'm the teacher, I'm always engaging with my students, they are engaging with them. But you can help them to engage with us a bit, kind of more freely, with fewer constraints. So for example, generating students-teacher rapport, insights from various leadership models. It's quite a lot. In organizational psychology, they talk so much about various leadership issues. I highlight it here too. Teacher expectations and transformative or transformational leadership style. Okay? Troubleshooting and conflict resolution. How many of you have actually ever been properly taught how to do troubleshooting and conflict resolution? There are disciplinary problems in class all the time, and yet I feel that we are underprepared for that aspect. And finally, the teacher's socio-emotional competency, which is a big issue, interesting issue. So I believe that these are 6 key facets of engagement. If you manage to help learners to engage with those targets, the school context, the foreign language, the syllabus, the learning tasks, peers, and the teacher, you've got involved students. And basically, this is more or less the table of contents of our book, because, I believe that it offers a comprehensive framework. So these are the 2 issues which I'd like to talk about. And engaging with the peer group. Now, something which I've been interested for a long time is group dynamics, which is a massive field. It's much bigger than applied linguistics or second language acquisition because it's part of organizational psychology, social psychology. It's big because groups exist everywhere in society. We spend most of our active life in society as part of groups. They can be educational groups, they can be sports teams, they can be family units, they can be faith groups. Groups are everywhere. And the study of these groups is done under the rubric of group dynamics. Now, it's particularly important for education because most organized learning occurs in groups, of course. And group characteristics and processes have a direct effect on the quality and the quantity of learning that takes place within the group. Again, you would say, of course, there are certain classes which are impossible to teach, and there are certain classes where you hardly have to make an effort because the students are driving the process. Why? It's because one is a good group, the other one is a bad group, okay? So, in a way, a knowledge of group dynamics can help us to consciously create productive learning environments. Now, from the engagement perspective, there is one particular issue of engaging learners which is important, and there are some others, but this is, I think, by far the most important: generating cohesiveness within the group. Cohesiveness is one of the key top 5 technical terms in group dynamics. It refers to the strength of relationship linking the members to one another and to the group itself. Okay? So it's basically how much the group hangs together, how much you relate to each other, but also to the group. It's very important, partly because it determines the productivity of the group. Cohesive groups are, very, very more productive. Of course, in the military, you have groups all the time, and they know group dynamics. They say that one reason why the British military is really, kind of probably the best in Europe is that there is this kind of conscious effort to create cohesive units with their history, with group legends, with all sorts of traditions, which then will allow people to really, really work together. My brother-in-law is in the military, and I can see that one thing which they really trained him well was, to be a team person. It's always, you are for the team, and the team can count on you, you can count on the team. That's why productivity is good. But also, cohesiveness will determine how much individual members will be able to engage with the group. Again, I don't think I need to justify this. So it's okay. So the question is, how can we promote cohesiveness? And the good news is that even though probably you have never thought about it, certainly most of you will have never thought about this, there are actually quite a few very practical things which will create cohesiveness. And they use this in the business world quite often. So I listed here just enough factors to fill one screen, okay? So we are going to. So first of all, learning about each other. You tend to be closer to people about whom you know who they are, you understand them. This is something which communicative language teaching has been really good at, student-centered learning. I remember when Mario Rinvolukri was saying, don't talk about the cardboard characters of the course book. There are 20, 30 exciting characters in your class. Talk about them. They are much more interesting than this. So there are opportunities. Proximity, contact, and interaction. Proximity is simply space. For a weird reason, we tend to feel closer to people whom we are closer in terms of space, which is why in lifts, elevators, you have this sense that you should actually talk to the person, greet them. It's simply space creates this. Contact is one step forward when you actually have opportunities to talk to people, and meet. That's why a kind of nice cafeteria brings people together. This is why tower blocks didn't, work. They were supposed to be, in the 1960s, they were kind of heralded as the new way of community organization. People will be a big family in the tower block. They forgot that in a typical kind of block of flats, there isn't any space when people can have contact with each other. Okay? That's why suburbia, in British suburbia, is so good, because Saturday morning people are either washing their cars or cutting the grass in front of the house, and they will inevitably meet each other. Okay? The next one is, interaction is simply when you talk to each other with a purpose, when you have something to do with each other. Again, extracurricular activities and things. Cooperation towards common goals. Cooperation is wonderful. When people, basically, you could talk about it for half an hour. When people get into a situation when they cooperate with each other, they will start loving each other for various reasons. And it's cooperative learning has been said to be the best learning approach in education, and it's really sad that it doesn't actually, it's not exercised virtually anywhere in the world. Intergroup competition. Now, groups which compete against others, well, they get very close to each other, and you can manipulate that. So in class, you can have small group competitions where you put together in the same group people who couldn't stand each other. It's amazing that if they win the competition, they will be best friends. Yeah. Investing in the group. Now, this is something, again, a very peculiar. Most of these things are peculiar because you can't really explain why they happen, it's just that they happen. The fact is, if someone invests in the group, the person will appreciate the group more. And by investing, of course you could talk about financial investment, but in education we are talking about effort investment. So if you ask students very early on in a language course to do some big homework, some massive thing, and they've done it, they are going to be much keener members of the group. Next thing is extracurricular activities. This is exploited in the business world all the time. They take away the staff for an away day and they do something which is joint hardship, for example, or common threat, because these bring people together. So if you go down, typically in Nottingham where I live, whitewater rafting is good because we've got Home Pierpont, one of the big kind of water centers of the British Olympic team, and you can go whitewater rafting. It's one of those things when you get into a dinghy and go down, one of these things and inevitably fall in the water, and it's very nice and everybody laughs. Once you survive those things, you feel so close to each other. Or common thread. Have you ever been to an exam situation when actually, especially an oral one, an interview one, when you are sitting outside in the corridor and one by one you are called in? After a while, you think those are your brothers and sisters, the fellow sufferers there. You start, best friendships developed in our university in Hungary because it was mainly oral exams, dreading the moment when we have to go in. Defining the group against each other, very dangerous, but very effective. This is what they do, in Harry Potter's style, these kind of independent schools where they have the different houses. This is, in Central Europe, where I come from, whenever a government is in trouble internally, what they will do is they play the nationality card and start, kind of breeding, tension against the neighbors, which is very easy because it's a very confusing area. And it works, people unite. When a country goes to war, everybody is loving each other. You saw those films sending off our boys to beat those, the enemy. Okay. And finally, the teacher's leadership style. So you can model cohesiveness. You can actually model an accepting, involving attitude. Don't forget, students always look at you. Whatever you do, students, it's registered in the students. So if you yourself demonstrate what it's like to be, kind of involving and accepting, will send a very strong message. And the absence of it will also send a very strong message. So if you don't care, students will get that. So the other subject is engaging with the school context. And the reason why I put these two together in this talk, because strangely enough, that's also related to group dynamics. Even though we are not talking necessarily about the classroom, but the whole school, but it's the key word, group norms. So basically, any school's ethos or values are mediated to the actual students through group norms. Because the group is the actual context where students spend most of their times. So everything which comes from the broader environment will be mediated to the group level and through group norms. And group norms are probably the other big concept in group dynamics. So what are they? They involve various explicit and implicit rules and routines that govern classroom life. Okay, that's fair enough, that's nothing. This is already more interesting. Some group norms are imposed by the school or the teacher explicitly, so there are certain things, but the majority emerge spontaneously. This is the important thing. This is the exciting thing. A real group norm which operates well is a social product. Now, what does that mean? That means that in order for a norm to have an impact, it needs to be discussed, accepted by the majority of the group. And this is where I'd like to give you the example. One of the biggest kind of norm and rule system in a country is the highway code, the driving regulations. Now, hands on heart, do we observe all the driving rules and the things? No. I must admit that this morning I was driving here, I sometimes exceeded the speed limit, okay? But the interesting thing is that there are certain things which we do accept. In Britain, you don't really jump the red light. And it's because people accept the importance. Motorway driving has gone totally berserk because for some weird reason, the speed limit has been kept at a ridiculously low level with the understanding that everybody is all right to go a little bit faster, which means totally undermined. You don't quite know now what is the rule. Are you allowed to do 70 in the fast lane? If you try to do that, you'll see the consequence of cars hooting. And so basically, even a very specifically described rule system only works to the extent that people accept the importance of that, okay? So, school norms can be turned into group norms by explaining to students the purpose of these norms. Very often in education, it's only the education and the military where we tend to do this. We just tell people what to do without explaining. Normally, normal social communication would involve justifying things and arguing it. And then convincing students of the usefulness of these norms, okay? And I'd like to finally highlight 3 critical norms at school level which will basically determine any success at the classroom level. One is the norm of mediocrity. This is the big, big baddie. Okay, so this is the big baddie. It refers to peer pressure on students not to excel, or else they will be called names such as, and I put down some names. I bet those names are already outdated, so perhaps people understand them, but I'm sure that students are quite creative at, generating new names. But basically, in certain schools, it's not done to do well, and it's a massive problem. Whereas in some schools, so my son went to the local comprehensive school, and we were quite happy about it, as long as we were convinced that there isn't a norm of mediocrity in the school. So even though facilities, everything is not ideal, but at least those who would like to do well can do it freely without actually being, bullied. Okay? Now, the next one is actually a good one. The norm of tolerance. Again, schools can promote this explicitly, at various assemblies, meetings. It has 2 levels. One, in general, to accept diversity, and by diversity you can have all sorts of diversity, gender diversity, mental health diversity. There are people who are less fortunate than some others in some areas, or so, well, you know what. But the second part is what's more important for language teachings. It's also the norm of tolerance about mistakes. Now, I don't know whether you realize that, but a language class is an absolute nightmare for, especially a teenager. Your social standing is so much at risk, A foreign language class is the only class where you cannot say a simple sentence without potentially sounding ridiculous. Now, teenagers get the picture very soon, and they realize it's not worth it, so they will be quiet. Unless you create a norm of tolerance when you convince people that not only is it okay to make mistakes, but actually without making mistakes, there's no way you can learn. So in a way, we should be worried if people don't make mistakes. Okay? Again, it's a norm, it can be set. You have to discuss it, you have to actually agree on it, you have to put a wall chart on the wall, mistakes are okay. You have to decide we don't laugh at people, we listen to people, okay? And finally, the norm of effort and perseverance. And again, this is a big, good norm. Now, this goes into deeply in motivational psychology. Basically, if people believe that it's their abilities which actually determine their success, they are not going to try unless they believe that they are talented. So this is the kind of thing when they say, sorry, I'm not good at languages, which is absolute nonsense, but in Britain, half of the kids at school would say that. There are very few people who actually, there are a few people who genuinely are not good. But 99% of the people in history have always found it okay to acquire a working knowledge of a language, a second language, if needed. So what you have to emphasize is, rather than ability-related explanations or ability attributions, you have to focus on effort. So that's the motivating thing. So basically say, you failed because you didn't put enough effort into it. That's good. Thank you. That's good because that means that if you work harder, you will actually succeed. So, and you can create this kind of norm of effort and perseverance, a related thing in the British psyche. I don't know whether it still exists, but it's certainly written about, is the stiff upper lip kind of thing. It's a kind of, again, a big social norm saying we are not going to give in, to give in to whining. Now, I don't know whether it's true, but certainly that's the kind of thing we can create at a class level. Conclusion. Engaging language learners in the 21st century is a formidable challenge. And I believe it's a bigger challenge, much bigger challenge than 20 years ago. It wasn't easy then either, but I think with this, social media, all these short attention spans, you name it, it's there. However, there are several, and I showed you several productive routes to student engagement. So this is not something where we are facing an inevitable losing battle. There are very specific ways in which you can engage students. And I believe that the good news is that students tend to respond positively when they sense that teachers reach out to them in an engaging manner. Students want to be engaged. Actually, contrary to beliefs, they don't enjoy being completely detached. That's the main book in educational psychology about group dynamics. Now, group dynamics in the classroom, the experience of language teaching, classroom management techniques, and that's what I was talking about. So, this is what we are working at the moment. Hopefully it will be out, because I believe that this is something which is genuinely useful. So we would like to actually promote the term engagement, because we believe that teachers can respond to that. Thank you very much.